D. Moore Docs present Wonder Number 5. The complete story of KevOnStage. Movement 1 before the upload. The stage before the screen. Absolute silence. Then the crisp, unmistakable sound of a stage microphone unholstering from its stand, a low mechanical clack followed by the warm, reverberating roar of a live theater crowd, breaking into laughter beneath the room tone. A steady head-nodding boom-bap rhythm begins to play, a warm bass line, a sharp snare, and the soft vinyl crackle of a church organ sample looping gently. Before the algorithmic feeds, before the viral video loops, and before independent digital infrastructure became a recognized model for success, there was a guy standing on a dimly lit comedy stage trying to figure out how to make a room full of strangers laugh without resorting to cheap tricks or easy punchlines. Now, for a long time, the entertainment industry believed comedy existed inside a strict dichotomy. You were either a mainstream club comic performing for late night adult crowds, or you were performing in niche spaces with a tightly bound audience. But Kevin Fredericks didn't just cross those lines, he challenged how those lines were drawn. He built a bridge between the black church, everyday family life, digital culture, and mainstream comedy. He didn't wait for Hollywood executives to greenlight a pilot. He didn't wait for talent agencies to decide he was ready for a special. But his story is not simply Hollywood said no, so he built his own studio. It is also about what happens after you build it, the risks, the failed experiments. Oh, I can't talk. Why y'all know? The reinventions and the contradictions that made the larger enterprise possible. Come here. You gotta hear this. Before the playlist and the production shingles, before the cameras ever faced the dashboard, there was a life lived in the margins between ordinary work and artistic ambition, because there is more to the story. This is one of my favorite things I ever had to research in my life. Okay, now let's jump in. Roots and rejection. Old home video audio fades in. The crackle of an old cassette recording, the distant sound of a church choir rehearsing in a sanctuary, and the warm chatter of family around a kitchen table. Okay, to understand Kevin Fredericks, you have to understand a life built far away from the traditional epicenters of entertainment. Growing up as a military child before developing his career in Washington State, young Kevin navigated an environment where storytelling, faith, and survival went hand in hand. The black church served as an early rigorous training ground for public speaking, cadence, and audience engagement. It teaches you how to read a room, how to build tension, and how to deliver a climax. Skills that would later become the bedrock of his comedy. But comedy was not a straight road out of ordinary life. It existed besides regular employment, family responsibilities, rejected ideas, bad shows, and the constant nagging question of whether talent could become a sustainable profession. Before KevOnStage became a recognized brand, Kevin was learning how to be funny while remaining employable, married, responsible, and deeply uncertain of what the future held. He balanced jobs, early acting pursuits, and the humbling reality of stand-up comedy rooms where the audience was more interested in drinking their beverages than listen to an unknown comic. They're lost. They're fucking lost. But anywho, his early career included aliases, difficult stand-up experiences, unsuccessful business ideas, and repeated missteps. There was no clean, uninterrupted rise from obscurity to stardom. There was only persistence, trial, and error. A resume of failures isn't a sign to stop. It's just the rough draft of a blueprint you haven't finished drawing yet. So don't ever get discouraged. Keep paying attention to this. and you'll be inspired. Now, the Playmakers. The sound of a camera shuttering sound of a camera shutter clicking, the scratching of a pen drafting a sketch script, and the friendly banter of brothers brainstorming in a living room. Crucially, Kevin's earliest digital breakthrough was not initially a solo operation. Long before the KevOnStage brand dominated digital feeds, he created comedy with his brother Jason Fredericks and their collaborator Anthony Davis as the Playmakers. Together, they produced church-centered sketches, short films, and online videos, building a foundational understanding of how to produce comedy independently. Kevin and Jason worked side by side, sharing a vision for comedic storytelling rooted in their shared cultural and spiritual background. That partnership was the true genesis of their video journey, and years later, Jason's passing would become a profound personal chapter in Kevin's life. The work they began together remained part of the history behind everything that followed. Parallel to this creative foundation was the partnership with his wife, Melissa Fredericks. Marriage, parenting, and the realities of building a household together provided both the emotional anchor and much of the raw material for his comedic perspective. They weren't just partners in life, they became silent and vocal architects of a shared future, navigating financial pressures and creative pivots as a unified front. You dig? Real beautiful black love, front and center. Get into it. Now, movement to the digital blueprint. The dashboard and the direct line. The sharp sound of a car door clicking shut, a seatbelt clicking into place, and the gentle tap of a smartphone being mounted onto a dashboard holder. By the early days of digital video platforms, Kevin had developed a sharp observational eye, but the dashboard camera did not begin Kevin's creative life. It clarified his individual voice. The group sketches with the Playmakers had demonstrated what he could build with collaborators. The car videos demonstrated what he could do with almost nothing. One camera, one observation, and the confidence to publish an idea before it became overproduced. You dig what I'm saying? Now, whether breaking down pop culture news, reflecting on marriage, or examining the hilarious absurdities of parenting, he spoke with conversational urgency. His comedy could reach audiences raised on church culture without being confined to church stages. It often avoided the most predictable shock tactics, but it was not sanitized or juvenile. Kevin could discuss marriage, attraction, parenting, faith, internet foolishness, and adult frustration while maintaining a voice recognizably his own. While the industry debated whether web series and original videos were real entertainment, Kevin was quietly building a direct relationship with an audience that eventually stretched into millions across platforms. He wasn't just generating views, he was building a community. You dig what I'm saying? Now, the ecosystem of collaboration. The sound of a crowd clapping, rapid mechanical camera shutters clicking, and laughter bouncing across a podcast studio. Smart creators build audiences. Visionary creators build ecosystems. At the center of Kevin's larger enterprise was Melissa Fredericks, his wife, creative partner, co-author, producer, and one of the primary architects behind the business that grew around KevOnStage. Their marriage is not merely material for jokes, it becomes part of the company's foundation. Together, they navigated parenthood, financial uncertainty, touring production costs, failed ideas, and the difficult transition from creating content to employing people who depend on that content. Okay, big boss moves, you hear what I'm saying? Around that foundation grew a wider creative community. One of Kevin's most important recurring collaborators is Angel Lakita Moore. Their chemistry, especially through Here's the Thing, turned cultural documentary relationship conversations and everyday disagreements into a repeatable media format built around trust and improvisation. Alongside performers such as Tahir Moore, Tony Baker, and a growing network of comedians, writers, hosts, and producers, Kevin helped create an environment in which collaboration could become more than a guest appearance. It could become infrastructure. Now, community isn't just an audience that watches you. It's a network that grows through every shared risk, okay? Now, when the stage went dark, keep your distance, okay? A microphone switches on inside a usually quiet room. Scattered applause rises from a deliberately spaced audience. Okay, I think it's set. Okay. Now, one of the clearest products of that moment was Keep Your Distance. The title was both an instruction and a challenge. How do you prepare the electricity, or not prepare, what is the word I'm looking for? How do you preserve the electricity of live comedy when closeness itself has become dangerous? How do comedians test material when clubs are closed? How do you create the feeling of a room when the room can no longer function normally? Kevin responded by building a socially distant stand-up showcase that combined live performance with digital distribution. Keep Your Distance gave comedians a stage during a period when stages had vanished, featuring rotating performers across an expanding collection of shows. It was more than pandemic programming. It actually demonstrated Kevin's emerging role as a curator. He was no longer thinking only about where he could perform. He was thinking about how to keep performance possible for other people. Now, leadership sometimes begins when your own stage disappears and you start building one that everyone else can use. I mean, it's his name. It's in his name. Let's see what's bound to happen. He's going to do great things, okay? Now, turning attention into infrastructure, the platform that closed, okay? The cheerful startup tone on a streaming application, menu selections click rapidly, then the sound begins to distort. One final click, silence. Surviving the digital shift was only the first phase. The next challenge was building infrastructure that could outlast any single platform. Kevin helped establish KevOnStage Studios, shifting from a solo content creator to a full-scale production company. But ownership did not make Kevin immune to failure. KevOnStage Studios expanded beyond a production label into a direct subscription platform, an independent digital home intended to carry original comedy, talk programming, unscripted formats, and opportunities for creators who might otherwise remain outside conventional television development. The ambition was real. So were the costs. A streaming platform is not simply a website filled with shows. It is technology, customer support, marketing, production schedules, subscribers acquisition, subscriber retention, payroll, licensing, and the constant demand for enough programming to justify another monthly payment. Creative independence had created operational dependence. You dig what I'm saying? Now, the platform needed Kevin's ideas, it needed his audience, it needed his money, and it needed all three to remain in motion at the same time. Eventually, the standalone KevOnStage Studios app closed. Rest in peace to that KevOnStage app, okay? Stage crew misses you. Now, the fact complicates the story about independent creators. Building your own platform does not guarantee people will remain subscribed to it. Owning the content does not automatically solve distribution. Escaping the gatekeeper can leave you responsible for every gate, hinge, lock, and repair yourself. Now, Kevin did not erase that chapter from his public story. He acknowledged the failure and examined what it cost. Because independence does not mean every idea succeeds. It means the failure belongs to you. Now, ownership gives you the right to celebrate that victory, but it also gives you nowhere to hide from the invoice. You know what I'm saying? So, that money. Okay, now successful failure. The soft turning of book pages followed by the sound of a pen scratching thoughts into a margin. By the time he authored books like Marriage Be Hard with Melissa Fredericks and released his New York Times bestseller, Successful Failure Lessons Learned, flat on my face. Kevin was explicitly reframing the apparent contradiction at the center of his career. Success was not the absence of failed attempts, it was the accumulation of lessons those attempts left behind. Now, the app closure, the difficult stand-up rooms, the abandoned business concepts, they were not detours away from the destination. They were the raw material that made the enterprise durable. Teflon, if you will. Okay? Now, from church sketches to Churchy. Church doors open, a congregation settles into wooden pews somewhere near the front, a microphone squeals with feedback. Years after the Playmakers turned church behavior into short-form internet comedy, Kevin returned to the cultural world with a larger canvas. Churchy followed Corey Carr Jr., the ambitious son of a prominent church leader. Attempting to build a ministry of his own, the series allowed Kevin to combine subjects that had existed throughout his career. Faith, hallelujah, ego, family, expectation, institutional politics, and the strange comedy produced whenever spiritual ambition collides with ordinary human behavior. Its journey also revealed how Kevin's relationship with Hollywood had matured. He was no longer simply trying to avoid traditional institutions. He had accumulated an audience, production experience, original intellectual property, and proof that culturally specific stories could attract committed viewers. That leverage helped carry Churchy from an independently nurtured idea into a BET Plus series supported by a larger production partners, including Spring Hill. The distinction mattered. Kevin was not entering television only as a comedian hoping someone would find a role for him. He entered as the creator of the show. The digital years had not replaced Hollywood. They had changed the terms under which he could approach it. And Churchy was not the end of that transition. Additional television works, including the BET Comedy Improv Limited series The Hospital, signaled that KevOnStage Studios was evolving from an online content brand into a broader television development operation. Now, independence is not refusing every partnership. It is building enough leverage to recognize the difference between a partnership and, let's say, a permission slip. Now, let's get into the legacy of self-determination. The warm boom-bap rhythm returns, mixing softly with the live theater crowd ambiance. Okay, take you there. Now, today, Kevin Fredericks stands as one of the clearest examples of how a comedian can build an entertainment business outside the traditional Hollywood system. His work has demonstrated that cultural specificity is not a barrier to universal appeal, it is the source of it. His career has proved, or I should say, provided an influential blueprint for independent artists navigating the modern media landscape. That influence eventually received formal recognition from the same larger media establishments he had spent years learning to navigate. In 2026, Kevin Fredericks was named to the Time 100's creators list, recognizing his evolution from internet comedian to a producer, building television, touring, publishing, podcasting, and original programming across multiple platforms. The recognition did not mark the moment he became legitimate. His audience had settled that question years earlier. It marked the moment the wider industry could no longer describe his work as merely internet content. But the true measure of what he built is found beyond the view count and the production credits. Spin that funky little 5, maybe a little 10 if you got it. But anywho, the final circle, the stage mic unholsters one more time, followed by a sudden rush across a theater hall. Then a powerful spotlight hums to life. Every comedian hopes for a standing ovation. Kevin Fredericks built something even rarer, an audience willing to remain after the experiment failed. A platform closed, ideas lost money, projects ended, rooms went silent, people he loved were no longer there to see what came next. And still, my God, the camera turned on again. That may be the true meaning of KevOnStage. The stage was never one comedy club. It was never one dashboard. It was never one application, production company, television network, podcast feed, or theater marquee. Before the studios, partnerships, tours, books, and television series, there were brothers trying to make something funny together. Every new production exists at a distance from that room, but it also carries something from it. The stage was wherever Kevin could place an honest idea in front of an audience, and wherever that audience trusted him enough to follow. Hollywood once taught performers to wait until somebody opened the door. Kevin learned to build doors. You dig what I'm saying? He learned something harder. Sometimes the doors you build does not lead you where you expect it. Sometimes the building closes. Sometimes the blueprint has to be redrawn. But failure does not revoke your right to create. It only asks whether you are willing to begin again. Kevin Fredericks did not build a career by never falling off stage. He built it by turning every fall into material for the next performance. A single laugh rises from the crowd, then another, then the entire theater erupts. I am D. Moore, and remember, there is more to the story. End of Wonder number 5.